Good afternoon, everyone. I say good afternoon. You are actually here from all over the globe, so it won't necessarily be afternoon for you. We're certainly welcoming people from the States here and from South Africa, although their time is similar to ours. I'm not sure whether we have anyone from further west than that. No, further east than that. Sorry, got my globe the wrong way round. Anyway, without further ado, welcome and a very heartfelt welcome to every one of you. Most of you we know well and can reach out in our hearts very immediately. There will be some that we don't know, but please don't feel you're reached out to any the less than the ones who are familiar with this space, which is a shared space actually today between White Eagle and Cana. Cana stands for Christians Awakening to New Awareness. So, welcome to Cana people, welcome to White Eagle people, and welcome to everyone. And the reason why you've been blacked out, as it were, you will be wondering why you aren't able to show your face, is reasons of GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations. Now, the good news is you're going to be able to turn the back on, but listen hard. For your privacy, to respect your privacy, because this webinar is being recorded, we have to give you the option of being anonymous. And there are two ways to remain anonymous. One is simply not to turn your picture on, but that will leave your name. If you wish to change your name so that you are totally anonymous, you use the three little dots in the top right-hand corner, at least it's top right-hand corner on my screen. Some of you may have it elsewhere, but it's three little dots, and it gives you the opportunity to change your name so you can become, 101 Dalmatians or something, and then nobody will know who you are. But most of you will be perfectly happy to be recorded. So as soon as you get a message saying you can turn your picture on again, please feel free to do so. I'm just checking my instructions that I haven't forgotten anything. Um, Tom, will you tell us when they can turn their um, picture back on, or can they do it already? He's not hearing me.
Colum, yes, just on your cue.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, I think any moment from now, if you'd like to turn your picture back on, any moment from now will do. And so, the faces that weren't blacked out, as it were, I don't think I like the word blacked out, but you know what I mean, are our speakers today. I'm just going to introduce them, not necessarily in order. Jane Upchurch comes from Cana, and she will be speaking as the event proceeds. Anna is from White Eagle. You know Anna, many of you.
Nightingale.
And we also have Bev Emery, who speaks as a
Oh,
soul
just
midwife.
took the picture off.
She'll be explaining a little bit about what soul midwifery is. And I can't see her picture at the moment, but we have Janice Dolley with us. Janice has a long,
This
long.
Colin is coming back again. You got a
Ah,
bit of a weak signal.
yes, I think she lost her signal, didn't she? Anyway, we don't need her present, except that you can't see her picture. Janice goes back to the days of Sir George Trevelyan and later the Wrekin Trust, and she will be sharing quite personal experiences with us. Now, the program today is a lovely one, and um, Tom is just going to show it to us in a moment, I think. I've at the moment just lost my copy of it. I had it a moment ago. I had it already. Um, yes, Tom is going to show us that on with screen sharing, except we seem to have lost it.
I can see it.
We have it, Colum.
Oh, I haven't got it. That's very strange. Well, if you have it, then you can see what is happening. Just a shame that I can't see it. I don't know why I can't. Anyway, these things are all sent to trials, and sometimes they succeed, don't they? Oh, here we are. I've got my copy, but it's not the shared copy. So you've got me introducing you at the moment, and then we will move on to Anna, who will be talking about White Eagle's teaching on the cycles of life. And then Janice, followed by breakout groups, Jane on near-death experiences. I shall lead a very short meditation at 3:10, and then afterwards I'll be with you again talking about human rituals around death. And then Bev will be talking about soul midwives. Anna will talk about reincarnation. I have some personal stories about people making their transition. And then Janice will be introducing a question and answer session for us all. And that's the final thing I need to say before we get underway. If you have questions you'd like to ask, will you actually put them in the chat? You've got your chat button at the bottom of your screen, and offer a question, and then we will put the questions together and we will try and deal with them in that final session. You will be muted most of the time otherwise, so you don't have the opportunity to ask questions until then. So I think that is all I have to say, and I'd love to now welcome Anna for our first little presentation.
Hi, everybody. Lovely to see you all. Really nice. I was feeling a bit uncomfortable about what I'd chosen to talk about in this first session. And that's always a sign of something needing attention or needing to be changed. And then I realized I didn't want to talk about theory, which you could read anywhere for yourselves, and plenty of White Eagle books about the theory. Theory is very exciting for the earthly mind, but we have to be able to live it and feel it for ourselves. That's one of my pet themes at the moment. So then that led me to read again one of the passages I'd chosen, and you'll see why I've moved on from theory when I read it to you. This is White Eagle, and he was asked the question, might not earthly life be likened to a sea or ocean which seems eternal, and we to waves or to the tides which ebb and flow, but are always part of the ocean? And White Eagle said, yes, that's a very good simile. Life is always there, but it does not always manifest in the same conditions or through the same form of matter. You only know physical matter, but there are other forms of life and other planets. Life always is. When you're on the crest of the wave, you cannot see what is in the trough. That is true in human experience, but we are also thinking in terms of progress. We are thinking that life goes on and on up the spiral. It is impossible for the finite mind to conceive life in all its fullness, impossible to conceive infinity or eternity. Don't think in terms of life and death, because there is no death. Do not think because a door closes that another does not open. You pass from one condition of life to another. In your material problems, never be anxious. Oh, how many times we tell you, when one door closes, another instantly opens. The trouble is that you like to have too many doors. You're not patient. You have to learn confidence in the eternal love and precision of the light. When a condition finishes, never try to hold on to it. Always move forward. Now, you'll see from that White Eagle goes from answering a question with that big answer about life going on and on. But at the very end, he says, in your material problems, never be anxious. So he switches it right round to us dealing with our daily lives. He's talking about time and ages, but he takes the reader's question and he expands it. White Eagle has moved from the concept into the spiritual practice. And that's what I realized when I realized I wasn't feeling comfortable, because it's the spiritual practice that's the important part. We can learn all the theory we want. We can know all the ages from top to bottom. But unless we can put it into practice, the whole purpose of life is that growth. And the practice in this case, White Eagle says, is don't try to hold on to it, always move forwards. So it's the practice of letting go and the practice of trust. He went on to say, we are not dealing merely with time as you understand it, but rather with a vastness, eternity. But not until one is released from the finite mind can one understand eternity. Eternity is now. It always has been and always will be. Can you, through endeavouring to glimpse eternity, get a real understanding of those great cycles of life or ages of which we speak, one intermingling with the other, one breaking from another, one being born from another, even as the planets are born from the sun and the universes are born one from the other? And then he said, it is stupendous. Well, if he could say that, we could certainly say it's stupendous. And again, in there, he is talking about the ages and time and all those big concepts of life, which are fascinating. But the one thing that he picks out is eternity is now. It's about living in the now. Those of you that are very familiar with mind, body, spirit things, you'll have come across that, about living in the moment, not living in the past, or worrying or having expectations of the future, but living now with trust. So then he goes on to say, we have often said that you have a wrong conception of time. Historians count the age of the earth in tens of thousands of years, occult scientists in tens of millions of years, and you are living in but one cycle. Astrologers will know about the 25,000 years of each cycle. They are familiar with how the different ages produce different qualities, and we learn from different things in those ages. For about 2,000 years, we have been in one age, which we could say is the Piscean age, and now we're coming in to the Aquarian age. And then White Eagle says, in the gradual evolution which life undergoes, humanity passes through stages or cycles of life in which definite progress is made towards the bringing forth of the soul. When one cycle passes, yet another comes, bringing a fresh influx of younger selves, of children of God, who are destined to undergo the same process of finding or discovering their true nature, their correct relationship to one another and to the higher principles of their own being. So again, we have finding, discovering our true nature, our correct relationships one to another, and to the higher principles of our own being. So again, it's what we learn from this that matters, what we work with, how we use it for the growth of our soul. Just keep an eye on the time, though we started a little late. White Eagle says, life commences from the center, from spirit, and it gradually radiates out into higher cycles and even higher circles of life, growing ever more beautiful and more perfect. Let us conceive the spiral of existence as ever tracing and retracing a circle, with each round going higher, with each cycle. The human soul moves to a higher vibration, nearer to heaven. Now, I have an image that some of you heard me speak before. A mountain and a spiral going up. It's a conical mountain, and a spiral goes up round it. And down the mountain are different streams of existence, different aspects of life, like having too much money or having lots of children or not having any children, and so on. And as we go round the mountain, we go across these streams. And then when we come back, we go across them again. And so there's constantly, White Eagle says, there's this spiral, but it's always going upwards, as he said, towards more beautiful and more perfect states of life, on a higher vibration all the time. It may not seem like it in our daily lives, but that's what is happening. We're always learning, but with everything that we experience. And White Eagle says, that we've reached the upward arc now, and we're moving into the age of Aquarius. And he says into that truly glorious period of the Earth's evolution and the wonderful influence of Aquarius, of Saturn, of Uranus, and the influences that can come, which are sometimes revolutionary, but also can help us to this glorious birth of a new and radiant life. And finally, he says, the Aquarian age then is that age wherein we become conscious of our true nature. And in a lot of cases, he's talking about being aware of through meditation of the psychic centers, of being able to touch those inner realms and being one with them, even in our ordinary everyday life. And the final little evolution of the spiral is when we become one with spirit again in its fullness. And the Buddhists put it in a certain way. They say the dewdrop slips into the shining sea. But when White Eagle said that, he said, it doesn't mean that you lose your individuality. It means that you can retake it up again at any time you wish, but that you are then part of that shining sea. So I'm going to finish there. But if
Thank you.
anybody has any specific question at this moment, and it may not be the time for it actually.
Yes, I don't think it is the time because everyone is muted and they haven't got the ability to speak.
Okay.
If you do have questions, remember, put it in the chat and we will then take those questions up in the session at the end of the day. And so I'm now going to go over to Janice Dolley. I've lost her on screen, but I'm sure she'll pop up in a second. And over to her talking about continuity of consciousness after death. Incidentally, after that, we do have breakout groups. So you'll have the opportunity at least to talk to each other about things you may have on your mind. So, Janice, are you here?
So my contribution is going to be to share some of my experience of what is now being termed after-death communication, or ADCs for short. This was a very new idea, but the experience of this is now becoming so widespread that it has actually reached the levels of scholarly research being undertaken on the subject because it's become so common. But my experience did start quite a long time ago. I was in church, this was the first time, for the confirmation of one of my daughters, when suddenly my father was in front of me. And I had a great sense of joy. And I thought, well, he can't be here unless Pop's died. And if he had died, I wouldn't be feeling this amazing sense of joy. But when I got home, my sister rang. My father, I knew, wasn't well, and my sister was nursing him. She rang to say he had passed. And for the whole of the next week, he was so present with our family. I had some amazing conversations with him. So that was the sort of beginning for me of learning that we can communicate with those who've passed over. It then was about 30 years later, I think, that my best friend, Ursula Burton, was diagnosed with cancer. And I was working full time, but I went up to be with her and look after her at weekends. And another friend, Joyce, looked after her in the week. So on the Sunday evening at the end of my shift, I flew home. Ursula lived in Edinburgh and I lived in Surrey. And the next day, Joyce rang to say Ursula had just died. So I quickly got in the car and drove to Heathrow and jumped on a plane. In those days, you could jump on a plane like getting on a bus. You just buy a ticket and get on. And I sat in my seat, put my bag up in the cabin locker, and I had just sat down. I hadn't even done anything. And Ursula appeared. I could see her with an inner eye. Some would call this clairvoyance, I think. And I could hear what she was saying, which is a sort of clairaudience. This was coming through. I could definitely know it was her voice, but it was sort of within my own thinking somehow. And this is what she said at the beginning. I can see what you're thinking. I can see thought. So I said, how are you feeling? And this was her reply. Fine, a bit shaky. It's freedom, glorious freedom. It's all very new, as you can appreciate. But I'm glad we have established connections so early on. We will use it for the real work later. And by that, she meant writing another book together. We were co-authors. Meantime, just be with it, the apparent separation. I mean, be with me, or what was me, the part I've left behind, all those ordinary things. and everyday needs and concerned, which are so restricting, but also jolly necessary. Can you imagine limitless breath, space, light, purity, freedom, knowing who one truly is? We've talked about how it might be, but this is so much more than we had imagined. Well, we had several conversations during that time, but I knew she wanted to write a book with me. That I was very clear about. But it took me 6 months to get leave from work. And I went to Iona. A friend came with me because Iona was a place that Ursula and I both loved, and also where somehow the veils are a little thinner. But I wasn't expecting anything specially to happen. But believe it or not, first morning we were there, 6 o'clock. There was Ursula. I could see her at the end of my bed. And we started a conversation at 6, and for every day from 6 until 10, we talked, and I scribbled all that we were saying. So I asked her several questions. And my first one, which is relevant for what we're looking at today, I asked her, what is dying like? And this was her reply. A sense of timelessness, of weightlessness, of free falling. I feel free floating might be a better description, as the movement seems to be more up than down. These terms are relevant because they're space-time words, but they're multidimensional, yet timeless experience is a different thing altogether. Do you know, Janice, death is liberating. At first, there's a mixture, bewilderment, even though one has been expecting it, and then liberation, freedom. Even from a fit and healthy body, I think we would feel this. But from a sick or body is true liberation from limitation, freedom from limitation. You can step and dance and breathe and feel joy all around. It's very joyful. Then comes the adjustment. This bit is not so easy. There's a kind of review process that comes after a recovery period to get used to a new space. It's like one relives every single detail of one's life. Details that you couldn't possibly remember on Earth. At the same time, one can see reason for things, how such and such fitted into a pattern, one's own lacks and limitations, one's own understanding. Even downright obstinacy, in my case, impeded a wholly natural flow. So that was just one of many conversations. We spoke together every day that week and then had several sessions in the intervening time. But it was 6 months before I could get away and really focus on it. And the book that eventually came out of all these conversations took 17 years to complete. I'll just hold it up so that you can see.
But we
the book
can't
eventually
see. Your camera is off, Janice.
It's called Awakening to a New Reality. Conscious Conversations Across the Horizon of Death. So my keenness to get this book out isn't to sell books, but it is to help more people to realize that when we die, we just move on to another sort of period of living somehow in a different way. And I think this is beginning to spread. When I was young and went to a funeral service or two, everyone was in black, mourning, top hats, all the sort of dark paraphernalia. These days, that's not the case. Most funerals are quite joyful celebrations of the life that's been lived. So things are shifting. One friend who died a year ago, but knew she was dying, she was very elderly, used to talk about her upcoming death as her graduation, which I think is an interesting phrase. It's like, I'm graduating from this particular course of learning. And I have heard of planet Earth being called a schoolroom. If you take a cosmic sense of all the planets in the universe, this is where we come to learn a lot. So maybe each life is a contribution to our soul's journey through many lives. Sir George Trevelyan, that I referred to earlier, used to describe death as the next great adventure, but that we all have a part to play while we're here and experience this life's adventure. So it has a significant importance. And our role is, well, your role is different from my role. All our roles are different, but it all makes up to a big shift that's going on. And he said, it's one thing I've always remembered. Out of the confusion of a crumbling society will emerge individuals who are touched by higher guidance. These will inevitably flow together with others of like mind, and a new quality of society will begin to form. This is the true adventure of our time. So I think looking at the continuity of consciousness must include how wonderfully important every moment of this life also is. Now, this idea of progressing from one adventure to another expands our worldview in 3 different ways. The first way I would suggest is that we begin to see our time in planet Earth as a learning journey. And each time we return, we've harvested the experience, which gives our souls more wisdom for the next journey. The poet William Wordsworth referred to this in his well-known ode, Intimations of Immortality from Recollections of Early Childhood. He said, our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. Our soul cometh from afar and has elsewhere its setting. Heaven lies about us in our infancy, but shades of the prison house begin to close around the growing boy, and he forgets from whence he came. I learnt that when I was in the 6th form, and I think it still has a lot of significance. You can turn it on its head and say that being born is the death, and death is being born. That would take a little bit of discussion, but it depends how we look at it. The second way our worldview expands is from our recent understanding that we live in a cosmos in which all is one and all life is deeply interconnected as expressions of the same one source that here in the West we call God, but has many other names: beloved, supreme creator. This is shared worldwide, the sense of a wonderful creator being that's within everything and within us. Therefore, it's understandable that we are told to love our enemies, to treat our neighbor as we would like to be treated, because we are all one family. That may be a big lesson that Anna was referring to. The Aquarian age is going to be part of the Aquarian age. So our time here is a great adventure in which we do our best to respond to the prayer, may thy kingdom come on heaven as it is on earth. If only we could help the warmongers to understand that. a third way comes from books I've read. And the two in particular I'd like to mention are Testimony of Light, which is a classic, really. And it was based on conversations between two friends, one who'd been a nun and had passed over, and one who was still here. And that's still available, I think, but it's was many years ago, decades ago that was written. And then more recent one that comprises conversations between two sisters. They both come from Slovenia. One sister, Anna Praganic, is here on Earth, and her sister Ira has passed over and is on the other side. But they have many conversations, a bit like Ursula and I had. And the one in the heavenly realm says she still feels very connected to everyone on Earth. And please, could we remember that we are still all one society, one family, and include them in our thinking and our planning and our preparations. This again rings bells with the relationship with White Eagle that some people still have. And Indigenous societies have always held that the ancestors were important and consulted them on important issues. Another experience was that when my own beloved husband passed over 5 years ago, it was only a few months later that our youngest daughter, who lived in Ireland, was one of the early victims of COVID. And she was very poorly. And of course, I couldn't, with the lockdowns, get to see her and help her. So I asked Alan, my husband, and said, can you help? And the next day she rang to say, I don't think you'll believe this, Mum, but Dad was with me last night and it was so comforting. So that was a nice reminder that we can still ask and receive with our friends on another level. I think my passion would be to help spread this idea of the continuity of consciousness, because it would make such a difference to the way we run society today. Wordsworth gave us a clue why this isn't happening in another poem. The world is too much with us. Late and soon, getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. It's a much longer poem, but it shows that it's our passion for materialism, for all the details of everyday life, which actually keep us from feeling into this bigger picture. But changes are underway. And we are beginning to realize that all life is energy, vibrating in different frequencies, and therefore different dimensions of being. We live every day eating and drinking in the third dimension. But there is a fourth dimension of innerness, of our feelings, which again, anyone with a spiritual inclination is already accessing. And then we're on the edge of shifting into what others call a fifth dimension. This may be a new thought to you, but it's one I've been thinking about for some time and did discuss with Ursula. And this is what she said. I'll finish with what she says about this because I think it's quite useful, and I'll read it slowly. One of the laws of the fifth dimension, just as gravity is a law of the third dimension, is that everything flows towards a pattern and a purpose in many dimensions at the same time. Learning to trust the process, to go with the flow or attune to an inner direction, is all new vocabulary in a way, and denotes the ways of being and ways of working within this new emerging paradigm. This may not seem to be new in a cosmic sense, but these ideas are new in the sense of being more consciously recognized and accepted. So I hope this has given you some new thoughts for contemplating and contributes to our confirmation and maybe help others to know that we are spiritual beings, we are on a journey. And unless you think I've been making this up, which one person did once say, and I know I certainly haven't, helps us to be increasingly certain that consciousness does continue on and on and on, and that every moment of it is special and precious. Nice to be talking with you, and I hope it's all come through with all the technical difficulties. Thank you. Okay, back to you, Colum.
Bless you, Janice. Thank you very much. You'll be pleased to know that once you turned your camera off, I believe we heard everything. I did. I trust that the whole gathering heard you throughout. We have, however, just before we go on, I'm being asked for the title of the second book, technically the third book you quoted, The Two Sisters. Can you put that in the chat? And then everyone will be able to see it. I put Helen Greaves in the chat and your own book. Tom even added where they can get it from. But we do need to press on. We should be having breakout rooms now, but I have a feeling, because we are rather behind schedule, that rather than risk that going on forever, as it were, Jane, do you feel ready to speak now? And we'll have the breakout rooms after you. It gives us just a bit more flexibility.
Yes, I'm fine. I'm here.
Lovely. So here is Jane to tell us about near-death experiences.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. So I'm going to talk about near-death experiences, sometimes called NDEs. I have not experienced this myself, but I have researched and studied it a lot. Hundreds of people have reported having an NDE so powerful that it completely changed their ideas about the nature of reality, about God, about death, and about how we can best live our lives here now. The next world is not the same as this one, but when we try to imagine or describe it, we can only use words or concepts that work here. Whatever we say can't fully communicate that other reality. As it says in the Bible, for now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. There is no top or bottom. It's a place of vibration, not matter, and yet things can be perceived as if physical. There are different regions with portals between, so one description does not cover all, and those who go have not had the same experience, but this is some of what it is like. The realm that we go to when we pass over, what some might call heaven, is an experience that is so powerful that it makes our life here feel unreal in comparison, as if that's the reality, not this one. Everything experienced is immediate. Seeing and hearing are not separate. You can hear the beauty and see the joy, see the music, as if you become part of it while remaining distinct. Any thought is immediately known, although perception is beyond words. It's like being in an ocean of unconditional love that is not just around you, but suffuses you through and through. It was experienced by people with a faith and people with none, by people who had lived a decent life and those who had not. Many did not believe that there was any life beyond death, and they thought they would cease to exist. Dr. Eben Alexander was a scientist and a neurosurgeon, and as many scientists do, he believed that consciousness was a product of the brain and therefore could not survive death. Not only was his consciousness alive and present and aware through his NDE, but the outer regions of his brain that are believed to give rise to consciousness were completely destroyed by meningitis. He now has quite a role in teaching scientists that the brain does not create our consciousness. Consciousness is primary, it is eternal, and can never die. Some were expecting hell or some form of judgment, but they were met with love, not fear. Some are frightened when they arrive, as it is so different and can be unexpected, but are often met by loved ones or pets, or by religious figures or spirit guides who reassure them. Some met angels, which even Alexander saw as shining orbs of light. Many go through some form of life review, which Janice was mentioning, and it happens in a blink, although it covers everything. It is not so much seen as experienced, and not only does the person re-experience their own feelings, they also experience the feelings of those they have affected at the same time, like being in two places at once. It covered little interactions. There were times when they had said or done something to hurt another person. The intent was important, and they could feel the wave of their own negative intent coming at the other person as if they were them, and they could feel the effect, and they knew how devastated they were. This wasn't about punishment, but about learning how powerful their words and actions, and even their thoughts and feelings were. They send out energy ripples, even if we don't speak. But to make sure that the person didn't feel bad about themselves, as that was not the intention, they would then be shown what seemed like a small, insignificant encounter at the time, but where they'd been helpful or supportive or encouraging. And here again, they could feel the positive energy coming from themselves to the other person and see the impact for good on their life. And this was not just about our interaction with people, but with animals and with any aspect of our planet. A few do seem to have a hellish experience initially. As it is a vibrational realm, people are attracted to the region where they resonate vibrationally. PMH Atwater, who has researched over 5,000 NDEs, has found that this does not seem to correspond with their lifestyles or beliefs. It may reflect something in the person's deepest self and seems to address the growth of their soul and what they had yet to learn as it transformed their lives when they returned. But it is not a permanent state. There are heavenly beings present to encourage understanding and growth and to minister love, so that as it is received, people can change and move on in the heavenly realm. NDEers were not just filled with this love, but with an awareness that this was the reality everywhere. Love is the underlying structure of the universe, as was unity. Everything is linked. This was true for Earth, although it could not be experienced here in the same way, as it is a realm of duality and separateness. But while in their NDE, one said, "I was everything, and everything was me." And another, "I became one with the light, absorbed by it. I had all knowingness." Another lady who's had a powerful NDE is called Anita Moyani. She says that the thing that passes over is our consciousness or pure essence and our love. That we lose all the layers and labels we've developed. We lose our gender, our culture, our race, our religion, our beliefs, which reminds me of Galatians 3 in the Bible, where it says, "There is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor is there male or female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus." Anita did not feel as if she had physically gone anywhere, but it was as if she had expanded and awakened, and she had unlimited perception. Time was not linear. She could see past, present, and future together, and her life intricately woven into what she had known so far. As Janice said, there was a huge sense of liberation, of freedom, feeling more alive than ever before, knowing things she did not before, engulfed by love, joy, ecstasy, and awe. She had died due to cancer, and she was shown that because she had spent everything she could to defeat the cancer, completely focused on what she ate and did, etc., etc., she had unwittingly been feeding it as it took all her focus and energy. She realized that she was a magnificent, beautiful being of the universe, and she was loved just because she existed, as are we all. She was told, "You do not realize how powerful you are." She could see that we and all things in the universe and beyond are connected. Everything is alive and infused with consciousness. Everything belongs to an infinite whole, and we're all facets of that unity. We have an effect on the collective whole. We have lived and will continue to live before and beyond our time on this earth. Almost everyone experienced God, deity, or source as an all-powerful presence or sense, whatever their previous religious beliefs or lack of them, although they did influence their terminology. This was an experience of universal spirituality. Some children saw God as a kindly father or grandfather type, but adults usually perceive God as a brilliant sphere of light. Even Alexander experienced God as an infinite, dazzling, inky black core filled with the sound Om. At the time, he was unaware that this is a sacred sound in some religions. He felt a bit like a fetus in a womb, nourished by and part of this being or state of being, yet at the same time distinct and minuscule in comparison. Again, the communication was without and beyond words, but the voice was personal and possessed the qualities we possess, although in greater measure. It knew him deeply and assured him of how much he was loved. As well as learning about life beyond this world, there was realization about life and our purpose here. Some were shown the sacred contract that they had made before they were born and what they had promised to do. It was so wonderful there that no one wanted to return, but realized that if they did, they would be very different. This was not to do with thinking that they needed to be more loving, but it was having experienced how powerful their words and thoughts were and how powerful what love was that changed them for when they returned. The encouragement for all was to live their lives there fully and fearlessly. To live their lives here when they returned fully and fearlessly. And the overriding purpose for everybody was to love. All were changed by their experience, although it took a while to integrate. There was a loss of fear, more intuitive gifts, and sometimes physiological changes, as well as a more spiritual and scientific understanding. Some could communicate at a deeper level with people on both sides. Jeff Olson was shown that things we perceive as wrong here are perfect for our soul's growth. There are no mistakes. He was told, look how much we love you. Honor your divinity. Honor your choices. Your will is my will, and I will honor your choice. When things happen that he finds difficult, he looks for the divinity in the people involved and asks himself, why did I create this? And what am I to learn from it? If heaven is so real, and we have come from there, how can we forget? How come so many are scared of dying? It may be that in order to live our lives fully here, we need to be grounded in this dualistic reality. But the love and oneness that are so obvious there are part of the fabric of our soul. We can remember who we really are, as Anna was saying. And we can remember how to live a life of spirit and love while we are here. This may be why some people believe this is why so many are undergoing these NDEs and sharing them so that we can become more aware of what it's like there. Heaven is our home. We can choose love. We do not need to fear death, but know that it leads us to a greater reality, to an ocean of freedom and spirit and love. And I'm going to finish with two of my poems. Essence. The end is like the beginning, they say, naked as we change worlds. The journey between is what we know, growing our outer and inner lives, then losing them again. What lasts? What is the essence woven fast and deep that births the waters of death like a ripe seed? It is not random. It is our soul and the fruit of the love we have chosen. And lastly, when I am about to die, I wrote this before I knew anything about NDEs. When I am about to die, don't cover me in tears or fears, but press close with your love and listen hard, for you will be sure to hear the steady breath of the one I love coming to carry me home. It is a new journey, and I will miss you all, my friends and sweet parts of my heart, so bear me up with your blessings. Don't hold back. Even if I seem asleep, my spirit can still hear. And if this is the last time I will know your voice this side of heaven, I want to hold it dear and journey on its waters. Wash me with your memories of sun and with your hope. Fill me to the brim with your tales of our harmonies and my place in your universe, that I might burst forth from this pod with the power of your love. Thank you.
And our next item is a very short meditation technically, if we're to keep to the program, I have 1 minute for meditation. I can't do a meditation in 1 minute. Well, technically you can. You can make it a one breath meditation, but I don't think that would satisfy all of you. Tom, at some point, just bring the still picture in, but the music later, if you can do that. Anna's saying we need the audio back. It may be that people can't hear me. Are you able to hear me? Somebody, yes, yes, I can see some nods and thumbs up. That's good. So, without further ado, let's just make ourselves very still and just feel that there is a divine holding mechanism. If you have things that you really need to share, remember you do have the opportunity to put them in the questions at the end or put them in the chat now so they are dealt with at the end. Meanwhile, let us just remember our English November. And you may think that's a very strange place to go for meditation, but November is often very still. It may not be the brightest month. But if you imagine a little bit of mist hanging over the landscape, it actually is a lovely way of entering into your own space. Just imagine you're going for a little walk in the November countryside. If you come from somewhere else in the world, I'm sure you have some sense of what England might be like in November. Just find your own place in a rather misty November day. Misty, but not unbeautiful. It can be beautiful when you suddenly see brilliantly colored leaves shining through the mist. It can be beautiful if you are aware of sounds like perhaps a stream running by you. And all of a sudden, you recognize that the birds are singing. Listen to the bird song. Bird song has a remarkable way to take us up above the earth. Birds have a freedom. They feel to us a little bit like nature spirits and angels. They can leave the restrictions of the earth plane. Just in a moment. And you are now up, above the earth, above the mist, coming into the sunshine, coming into the brilliance of the sunlight. Breathe, for you are breathing light. Fly, because you are free. Sing, because the whole universe is one. And pray, because the presence of universal being is apparent to you. It comes with the sunlight, only sunlight more intense than anything you've ever known, without it being blinding. Your awareness of God. Receive the blessing that comes upon you now. A communion with the source of life and with all life. And that sense of all life is also a call to us. We are servants of life. Our very incarnational path is to serve life. And filled as we are now with the light, we take ourselves back in consciousness to the everyday world. The light remains in us. The earth awaits our feet. Touch earth, feel your feet touching the ground. Get your balance, stand, feel strong on the earth. Connect with the earth. You are, as it were, a channel between heaven and earth. The earth energies lift you in posture. You are strong on the earth, as we say. The light shines from your heart. And so we come back to our broadcast, and we are now going to take a little break. I'm going to shorten it slightly. We were going to break until 3:30. I think we'll break until 3:35. So do whatever you need to do in these few minutes, and we will start again at 3:35. I think you'll get the lovely butterfly in that time. So see you again, 3:35. Thank you, Tom. Okay, everyone, it's 3:35. Tom, you need to turn the recording on, of course, and then we'll begin again. Oh, Tom tells me that the recording has been on during this time. Don't worry about that. There won't be pictures of you going in and out. Anyway, I'm next on the schedule. I'm going to be talking about rituals around our transition, and I've got a later talk about the actual process of dying with some personal stories. What I wanted to say now, though, is just to talk a little bit about death as a rite of passage, because whatever else happens, it's a fairly major transition. You know, now you see them, now you don't, as it were. We do go from one state to another, and that's not to be underestimated. Although, so beautifully, Janice mentioned, and White Eagle certainly says time and time again, that that process is really a birth. We don't need to talk about death. And White Eagle talks of us always needing to celebrate when someone makes the transition. My own dear mother, who some of you will know, will have known, always, when anyone passed on, she got the news and she would say, "Oh, how wonderful." And I can assure you that was without exception. Even when her own dear sister passed, her reaction was of joy. I think she sets us a wonderful example there. So there's a milestone, and there is a sequence. We live in linear time, even if it's an illusion. Our modern rituals are very flimsy ones compared with how they were in earlier days when religion was so much more important to people. But some of the rituals at the moment of death have been very, very significant. And for some people, the process of death can be rather carefully delineated. If you're a Buddhist, you may be familiar with the doctrine of the bardos. The bardos, in some systems, there are 6 of them. In simpler systems, there are just 3. One is the actual process of being born and entering into this world and all that goes on in this life. And the second one is the moment of death, the moment when you seem to have left earthly consciousness. The third one, though, is after what the Buddhists call the final inner breath. And it's the state of luminous being. And that's your world that you enter into as you prepare, however long that may take, if it's earthly time. There's no time if you're out of earthly time, of course. You prepare your return. I don't want to stay on Buddhism for any length of time, but I just wanted to draw tribute to a system where that process is so clear. One of the things that I have to do in the course of my work is to take cremation services. I've lost count of how many I've taken, but I would think it must be up in the hundreds, 150s. And I think I could honestly say that I have found every single one of them rewarding. There is something about being together, commemorating a life, which brings out the best in everyone, but it brings out people's togetherness. You really feel part of the same process. But also, and it's a huge luxury, if you're fortunate enough, the presence of the one who has passed on can be very, very real in that moment. And I have had some very beautiful experiences the which I do not have time to share right now, but every now and again in my work I do share them. The cremation service in White Eagle Lodge begins with a real recognition of people's feelings, a recognition of their grief, but also a real attempt to get beyond grief, because it's as you leave grief that you really do make contact with the soul who has gone on, as it were. Grief is a bit of a barrier. The service contains prayers and readings, maybe from the Bible, maybe from White Eagle's teaching, and of course, as at any funeral service, some sort of celebration of the life of the person who's passed on. And that is part of the beauty of it, recognizing all those things that you didn't know, recognizing that actually everyone's life is a journey and that everyone faces an awful lot of tests. And in so many cases, people are absolutely triumphant in what they achieve in their lives, not in earthly sense. It doesn't mean they've gone on to be President of the USA. It does mean, though, that the karma that they brought back with them is something they've faced, gone through, and come out the other side, hopefully with that karma now sorted, ready to go on. But the other thing that I feel so strongly when I take one of those services is that there is a rite of a rite of passage going on. And you might think, yes, of course there is. It's somebody who died. But there's a process going on in us, and it's a process of letting go. The one thing we have lost is the physical body. And so we go through a conscious process of saying goodbye to the body. And in the White Eagle service, it's rather lovely because we literally return it to the elements. We call upon the angels of the earth, air, fire, and water to take that body and return it into its finest parts. I don't mean this in any flippant way, but it does mean that everything gets recycled. That is the beauty of life. Sometimes I feel that there's a wonderful response from the higher world. I'm going to tell you one little story, which is that I had to take a service down in Bournemouth, and it was one that I was very apprehensive about. I won't go into a lot of detail, except that the person was young and someone that I knew personally well, and, there was just all that extra stuff going on. But the service was beautiful, and I know that I was really helped in taking the service by the dear soul who had passed on. And when we came to leave the crematorium, we went out, as you so often do, by a side door, and I was first out because I normally lead the family out and then turn and sort of take handshakes and so on from people. But being the first one to see out of the door, what was there in front of me but a full half circle of rainbow? It was absolutely unbelievable. The path went straight out from the chapel, and over it, absolutely, with the path bisecting it in the middle, was a rainbow. And so we all walked out into the rainbow, and when everyone was out, the rainbow went. It was quite extraordinary. The timing and everything was so exact. I cannot quite believe that that was done without some sort of divine intervention. And I'm so glad to be able to share that story with you, because I think it does show we're not alone. The other part of this little talk that I wanted to offer, though, is about a particular subject of mine that means a lot to me, and it's the time of the Cathars, the 14th century heretics. Well, we call them heretics. Actually, I would love to argue that they represent the true tradition from Jesus down through St. John, and it's a tradition in which, in White Eagle, maybe in Cana, I don't know, we're still operating. It's a tradition of brotherhood, and it's a tradition of loving one another and being very, very aware of our contact with the Christ, the Master, Jesus, if you like, but not so much with the personality, the human personality, as with that higher being. Now, as I say, the Cathars to me are in that same tradition. Modern historians don't tend to regard them as a counter-church. The whole idea of them having a structured organization has largely gone out the window, and it enables us to see them much more, as White Eagle often talks of them, as a brotherhood. But he loves to mention them for a very particular reason, and it's around their ritual, which was known as the consolamentum, being consoled, being comforted. We've no record of how that name came to be chosen, but it does seem to look back to the time when the disciples of Jesus received into themselves the Holy Spirit. For the Cathar, it was allowing the Holy Spirit to manifest within your whole being. And it meant a renunciation of worldly life, not quite like a monk. You carried on doing the same sort of, leading the same sort of life as you had before, except that it involved a commitment to restrain yourself in ways which were exactly those prescribed by Jesus in teachings like the Sermon on the Mount. The Consolamentum, though, might be seen as an initiation into that belief system, but it was something more. It was very much around death. Some people received it during their healthy lives. Many, many people received it when they absolutely knew that they were leaving life behind. Either way, it was a sort of death. If it was while you were still healthy, it was a death of all that held you to this world. An extraordinary process, a process of enormous renunciation. But White Eagle sees it as something a little bit more than that. White Eagle is so clear that going through the Consolamentum was a moment when, by your firm embrace of the new world that you were recognizing, what White Eagle might call the Christ world, certainly a higher world, a world in which Christ was manifest in you. But of course it meant leaving behind anything that got in the way of that. But other than that it took you onwards in your path, your reincarnational path, indeed the Cathars believed that it marked the end of your reincarnational path. But for White Eagle, it is such a clear demonstration that there is a moment when, if you really inwardly attune, if you really understand what you're doing, the awareness of the other world becomes so strong. You go through a process where there is no longer fear of death. And he would quite reasonably say that the way we know that is that the Cathars are so often recorded as having gone into the flames because many of them died at the stake, but they went in smiling, shining with light, laughing and singing. And if that's not an overcoming of fear of death, well, I'd like to know what is. And so our path, if you are attached to the White Eagle Lodge, is one of progressively discovering how to overcome the mad fear of death. And I'm going to leave it there. I'm not quite sure whether I've gained any time or whether I have lost time, but let's now get back to our next topic. I'm just rediscovering my program. There it is. And we're now going to move over to Bev. Dear Bev, who speaks from the Soul Midwives grouping. I'm not quite sure whether you call yourselves an organization or what, but dear Bev, I'm sure you will be telling us. Over to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes, indeed.
Good. Lovely. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon to you all, and I hope you've all managed to take something wonderful from the previous speakers. And I'm going to get back to basics here a little bit, and just tell you what we are as soul midwives. I don't know how many of you will have heard of soul midwives. We are a group of women and men who have trained with a wonderful, wonderful lady called Felicity Warner, who over the past 25 years has worked with the dying and has developed a wonderful program of people who now we are some thousands of soul midwives in the United Kingdom. We're in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, the USA, and Europe now. So we are a growing number. We come from all walks of life. There are obviously a lot of nurses and carers who feel drawn to this, but funeral directors, ministers, healers, counselors. I personally trained with an accountant. There are people from all walks of life, and it's a training offered to anybody who feels drawn to the work of a soul midwife. So what is a soul midwife? Just like a birth midwife who helps in the preparation of an upcoming birth, we work with people who perhaps have been given a terminal diagnosis or has a life-limiting illness and need to make preparations, if you will, for the dying process. Obviously, for a lot of people, people are given a diagnosis, and the first response is fear. What do I do now? How do I tell people? What's going to happen to me? what do I do? How do I prepare for this? And if somebody has been given a terminal diagnosis, then they will often be guided towards working with somebody like ourselves, a soul midwife, or counselling, and they will find us. I believe, Colum, that you're going to put up the Soul Midwives website, but if not, it's soulmidwives.co.uk. And often people will go to the website to find a local soul midwife in their area, and we will be put into contact with them. We also are found quite often through organisations such as Maggie's, which often Maggie's a cancer help support group, often working with local hospitals. So we are found through, sometimes through a GP, if we've got a GP who is open to working with us. We are not part of the NHS, and so the NHS tends not to refer people on to us because we are not part of the NHS, although we do work with the NHS on several levels. We can be found through word of mouth. Obviously, the more people we work with, our work gets talked about, and we have people contact us, and we work with them that way. We are contacted through support groups as well, cancer support groups, arthritis groups, any group that is working with life-limiting illnesses. We are insured and usually have been checked by the Disclosure and Barring Services. That's a DBS. It allows us to go into people's homes and work with them that way. It's a safety measure. And often you might have heard of death cafes. They don't sound very nice, do they? But it gives people an opportunity to have a cup of coffee and a slice of cake and talk about death in all its and all its associated fears and problems, really. In the United States, we're usually thought of as death doulas or end-of-life doulas, but soul midwives, I think, sounds a lot nicer. And so we are trained to offer holistic and spiritual palliative care. The intention of the death cafes, if you will, is to bring the subject of death and dying back to the mainstream. Many people still, it's a taboo subject for so many people these days, and we want to bring that back into the mainstream, people talking about it, thinking about having a better death. Back in the good old days, prior really to the NHS and what that brought for us, people would die at home. Granny would live in the parlour because she couldn't get upstairs anymore. And as she failed, everybody would come and go, say hello to Granny, and even the children would see the dying process as somebody failed and slowed down in life. And then Granny would die, and she would be laid out, and everybody would go and see to Granny, and then she would have a funeral. And it was a process that was normal. It was the circle of life. Children understood life and death. So what we are hoping to do is to bring dying back into the normal mainstream. We offer spiritual, emotional, physical, and practical support to friends. We don't call them patients. We don't call them clients. We call them friends. And we have the 12 principles of soul midwifery, and that is to guide and support a dying person and to help them achieve a loving, dignified, and peaceful death. To support and recognize the individual needs of the dying person and ensure that they feel loved and supported. To create and hold a sacred and healing space for the dying person, whether in a hospice, hospital, or at home. To respect and honor our friends' religious, spiritual, atheist, or agnostic beliefs. To work as non-denominational, multi-faith practitioners who do not impress their beliefs about life, death, or the afterlife on their friends. To listen with empathy, not sympathy. To serve our friend, not aim to fix or rescue. To be humble and work without ego. To give healing using sound, touch, color, or scented oils as required. To keep a loving vigil. To work with the spirit and the soul of our friends at all levels and stages of transition. To give loving care with a human touch. I personally come from a nursing background, and I've been a healer since childhood. I've been teaching Reiki for the past 25 years, and my work is entirely energy-based. Now, by that, I mean, when I'm working with somebody, I always connect with a friend through the heart chakra, which is a gateway to the soul, and it's a pure love connection. We, as soul midwives, are working with the physical body and the emotions of that person, but we are also, and most importantly, working with their spiritual aspect as well. We also have now what we call TLC trainers, and that is literally tender loving care. It's a simplified hands-on training without the spiritual teachings, and that's taught in nursing homes. It's taught to carers, family caregivers, so that even in a nursing home setting or a residential care home setting, the staff have the basics of how to work with somebody who is in the dying process. they can then perhaps choose to actually train as a soul midwife if they want. And there are many, many nursing homes now across Britain who have trained soul midwives working with them, or they may actually retain a soul midwife to come in as somebody is actively dying. There are two elements of care for us soul midwives. Firstly, there's practical support. When we first meet a friend, we spend time with them, obviously assessing their needs, we're listening and holding a space for them. We need to be available to them on an emotional level as well as a physical level. And so normally we start with doing something practical for them. That might be, for example, setting up an end-of-life care plan. Now, there are lots of ways to do this, and you can Google an end-of-life care plan, and there are lots of resources available to us these days. Using a planner, we can start looking at the dull and boring things, but very important, such as where are our documents? What about dealing with our property? Passwords these days for Facebook and all of our apps on our phones, etc., etc. When somebody is going to work with us as when we're dying, have we got somebody to sort all of this out for us? Have we got somebody to look at our finances? Deciding on funeral plans, it's an awful thing to have to do if you've just been given a terminal diagnosis, or you know that you have a life-limiting illness. One of the things we suggest is that think about these things way in advance, get them dealt with, and then get on with the fun of living rather than having to sort all these things out at the very end. But do we want to have a simple cremation? Do we want to buy a prepayment plan? What kind of coffin do we want? There are wicker coffins, and you can have a very green burial. There are cardboard coffins. Some of them are colourful and decorated, and some are simply cardboard, and then you can have children help decorate the coffin. It's a major thing if you are working, or if you're a parent or a grandparent or work with small children. How to include them in the dying process. Do you have a lasting power of attorney? You have them for health and well-being or financial. These are really important if you can't speak for yourself at a later stage in your illness. Do you have somebody who understands your wishes and will work with your wishes if you cannot speak for yourself? In the event of an infection, for example, do you want to have antibiotics administered? Do you want to be put on life support? There are a lot of things that if you cannot speak for yourself, if you have had a stroke or in any way unable to communicate your wishes, the medical system is such now that they will do what they see is best for you. So you must have a lasting power of attorney to deal with your health and well-being and your finances if you don't want to come unstuck. A family member cannot say, Mum wants this doing. If you don't have it down in writing, it's not a legal thing to have. They can take up to 6 months to process, so it's something that we need to consider in advance. And like a will, you should revisit a lasting power of attorney document to ensure your wishes are still up to date. Things change. It's not a will. A lasting power of attorney is valid whilst you are alive but cannot communicate. And once you die, the will takes over. Do you have a DNR? Do you need a DNR? It requires a GP or a doctor's signature. You have to go and talk to your GP and say, in the event of a catastrophic heart attack or stroke, I do not want to be resuscitated. You would keep that paperwork with your lasting power of attorney. These days, if you are called upon to, or you require paramedics or medical assistance, if you do not have a lasting power of attorney or a DNR in place, the medical people are required by law to try and keep you alive, as unless it's absolutely non-viable. So please talk to your family and your extended family, your friends. Let them know your wishes. Have somebody who will speak up for you if the worst happens and you really require somebody to speak for you. Working with children, when somebody is dying, the hardest thing I think for anybody is to have, if they've got young children, is working with those children and including them in the dying process if you want. You've got to talk to children about an upcoming death and try to answer their questions. Parents, grandparents, people who are very close to small children often really worry about what they can do with the children as whilst they're still alive, but also afterwards. And we always encourage children to perhaps have conversations with their loved one who has passed. Talk to them as though they are still present. If a child is small and has a parent with them who is listening to that, perhaps we could call it a phone call, dear mum, I miss you. And the child can talk to their loved one. then perhaps the other parent will be able to hear the questions that child's asking and work through it with them.
Bev, I'm very sorry to interrupt, but we're rather running behind time.
Okay. So personal care wishes. We need to talk about how, when we are in the process of dying, how we would like to be treated. Do we want gentle, soft music in the background, a little bit of poetry read to us? Do we want soft candlelight, perhaps the use of essential oils, light touch or massage? My plan says, don't touch my feet, because I hate my feet being touched. So I want warm, fluffy bed socks, and I don't want anyone messing with my feet. But these are things that we talk to people about, and how they would like to be treated at the end of their life. The second part of the soul midwife's role is when their friend is actively dying, and this is the very spiritual part of the whole process. The first stage in the dying process is the withdrawal of elements, and I think, Colum, you mentioned this. There's the earth element withdraws first. The physical signs are weariness and aches and pains and sense of smell. The water element is next, and that shows up as difficulty moving the tongue or swallowing, losing control of bodily fluids, cognitive hearing loss. That person might feel weepy or clingy. The fire element is the third element to withdraw. And you see temperature fluctuations, restlessness or agitation. The vision narrows. And then we have the last element to withdraw from the physical body. And that involves breathing changes. We've all seen that, breathing irregularities, perhaps the chain Stokes breathing, the death rattle. And the withdrawal of the elements can occur over quite a long period of time with clear delineation between each one, or they may suddenly run into each other and the whole process can be over very quickly. So it's important to understand that when a friend is actively dying, the soul midwife is working with the physical body, obviously, but equally with the energetic or light body. The elements are connected to the chakra system and the astrological system. So at this point, we are working with the energetic system, ensuring that there are no blockages within that person's energy field that could hinder the dying process or may create pain or discomfort for the friend. So we work within a sacred space and we create a field that carries the vibration of unconditional love. So we may only see a friend for a short period of time. We may only facilitate part of our role, which may be helping them on a practical level, or it may be that we are with them right through the whole dying process and we are vigiling them as they pass. And whilst we are doing that, we are holding them in a space of love and acceptance and allowing the body to let go and allow the spirit of that person to leave comfortably, peacefully, and transition. So I believe, yes, we have the Soul Midwives website is soulmidwives.co.uk. The Soul Midwives Handbook by Felicity Warner is
Dear Bev, we're
now
way behind schedule.
okay.
Please,
We're
please
done.
close now.
So that's a little bit about our work and how we work and how we help facilitate a gentle and peaceful dying.
Thank you. Thank you, Bev, so much. And I do apologize for
No
rather
problem.
rushing you at the end, but we are now rather a long way behind our timetable. And I'm going to hand straight over to Anna, who wants to share some things about reincarnation with us. You're muted, Anna.
I need to be unmuted, I was trying to say. Right. Just a couple of things, I think, just to keep us on track. I'd like you to look at your hand. Just look at your hand. I'm bringing it right down to trying to get us to actually be aware of the theory in practice again. So when you look at your hand, you see a physical hand. But if you could imagine that both in the hand and also in the whole of the body, there are other bodies. There are etheric bodies, there's soul, there's astral body, higher mental bodies, spiritual bodies, but they are coexistent. They're all here now. And this is how one of the reasons it makes sense of what happens when we die, in the sense of living in another dimension, if you like. All those bodies are coexistent, but in different dimensions, which I think has been mentioned already. And when you think of yourself like that, then it's not such a big thing to actually let go of the earthy bit and move into the other body, and so on, through all the spheres of life. And also it makes sense of OBEs and of the fact that sometimes we recognize places and people that we've known before in other lifetimes that were not in this lifetime, skills that we're born with, which we haven't developed, but just appear to be there. That actually that's all contained within our consciousness. White Eagle talked about a downward pointing. He said your soul is like a downward pointing triangle, and it's only the very, very tip of the soul that is in incarnation as a physical body, and the rest of us is in spirit. And that's the bit that's learning, as other people have said, all the time when we come back. And then when we die, this bit of us, all the learning becomes part of that greater soul. All that isn't wanted just melts away. All that is good learning and where we've grown becomes part of that greater soul, which goes on and on. But one thing about reincarnation that White Eagle is where it's different from some ancient texts is that we don't come back as panthers or worms or flies. White Eagle says, we would enlarge your conception of reincarnation so that you put aside the idea of a small soul continually bobbing backwards and forwards. We want you to get the larger, grander idea of the continual growth of God consciousness within this greater soul of yours. So in other words, he's saying here and now, there is this growth of God consciousness within us. And several people who've spoken have talked about it all being present now, not something that we're striving towards or some ladder that we're climbing, but it is all here and now. Do not run away with the idea, White Eagle says, that to reincarnate is to retrogress. Reincarnation is spiritual evolution, because each time you re-enter physical life, you become more beautiful. That's an interesting way of putting it. There also are souls freed from the wheel of rebirth who return voluntarily in order to help humanity. So he's actually saying when we return to physical life, we become more beautiful. And that's because within this physical life, we have all that we need to progress our soul, to increase that triangle, if you like. And it's our circumstances, our bodies, the people we meet, etc. One of the lovely things that I think is so important that White Eagle mentions, he says, your life is like a pebble dropped into a pool of water, creating ripples endlessly. You know not the end of a work, a thought, an action. And that brings us right back to what we do now in this lifetime that matters. Who we meet, how much love we bring to bear in the way that Bev was talking about with what she does, and our other speakers have mentioned, how much love we bring to bear in this lifetime. Learning how to bring love into every circumstance that we find ourselves. And that's what enables that soul to grow. And it enables it to grow now. So although then, once we get to the other side, White Eagle says sometimes the soul will spend a long period resting in the heaven world. Then it appears that when the spiritual evolution of the, got the wrong piece of paper there, but then it might decide to come back and get on with the work of helping people. And the White Eagle work is very much linked with this idea of service in that sense, that when we come back, it's not just about our own growth as that triangle, but it's about how much we are like a pebble dropped in a pool of water, not knowing the end of a work, a thought, an action, and how much that work, that thought, that action can be connected with love in all its ramifications. Then when we come back for another life, there might be things that we choose to work on in our next life, where we want to make reparation, perhaps, for something that we thought we could have done better. Or we might help other people in a way which we couldn't do in a lifetime. And so the whole purpose of our coming back into incarnation is to serve others, to serve the growth of our greater soul, and to serve the planet. So because we're all interconnected, I think it was Jane or Janice that mentioned the interconnection of all life. When we work in this way, we are actually helping the whole planet to rise. We're not just doing it for ourselves, because earth, air, fire, and water is what we're composed of, which seems to be a theme that has run through today. And it's what the earth is composed of. And we're composed of the stars as well. And so when we come back to work on ourselves in a lifetime, to learn and to grow, we help the whole of humanity, the whole of the earth. So if we want our earth to become a beautiful place, it's not just about joining Compassion in World Farming or joining one of the wonderful organizations that are actually helping to build, to bring more trees and to help the planet with the various struggles that it has at the moment, but actually the very work that we do on ourselves. And one of the lovely things about that for me is that you could be lying in bed for the rest of your life, but actually you could still, through your heart, through your love, through your thought, be helping the whole planet. And that's our service. And I've put in the chat a book that I mean, I've put a White Eagle book in there, of course, you'd expect that. But I've put in the chat Out of the Darkness, which is a book by Steve Taylor. Oh, it won't show it. There we go. And in there are stories of people who've not only had near-death experiences and experiences where they've experienced the kind of thing that Jane was talking about, but they have actually they've kept that going. The actual experiences they've had, the transformatory experiences, have actually stayed with them. They've not been just gone. And they are all about love, about service, about light, about connection with each other and with the planet. And there's a wonderful one by Michael in there. If you get the book, read Michael's story, because it's heartwarming, but also tragic on one level. And out of that tragicness, the heartwarming comes. And I'll just say one more thing from that book. Ram Dass gives a forward in it. And somebody once asked Ram Dass, when he was dying of cancer, they said, "Is there any pain?" And he said, "There is pain, but there's no suffering." And I thought that was a wonderful expression of spirituality. That's all, I think, to keep us up to time.
Bless you, Anna. Thank you so much, and thank you for finishing so efficiently. I have another short talk to give now. I'm going to make it very brief indeed, because it's really rather important that you should all have the opportunity to ask your questions, and we lose our technical support at 5, so we really don't have much time left. I just wanted to share some personal stories. They are all ones that are, one way or another, I have a personal connection there. But Anna mentioned the White Eagle book, A Guide for Living with Death and Dying, and one of them by myself is written up in there, and another one I shall probably actually read from there, or keep my reading to a minimum. So I just wanted to give a hopeful realization that when the moment actually comes, people do handle it well. Obviously, everyone is different, but these are stories of people really handling that moment well, and they're ones that have meant an enormous amount to me. First of all, in the London Lodge, we had a dear soul. I'm just going to call her Anne. That is her real name, but I won't otherwise identify her. She was a tower of strength all the way through her life. A bit sort of call a spade a spade. Whatever she did, she was clear about it. She'd had an association with artists and with dance and even with opera and so on. So she was very used to working in the artistic world. When she had a terminal diagnosis, she just decided that she was going to approach it as a bit of work. And I went to see her a number of times when she had, as it were, taken to her bed. She lived with her partner on the outskirts of London, and I just remember every time I went, I thought, this is how a White Eagle person has learnt to die. And I can't go into a lot of detail about it, but I only would say that I keep in my heart, to this very moment, the sense that what she was doing absolutely bore out the teaching, and I really salute her for it. Now, there's another story, and this is the one that is in the Guide for Living with Death and Dying. It comes from a White Eagle person in America. Her father was diagnosed with colon cancer when she was really quite young, and he went downhill quite fast, although it was 3 years from diagnosis to his passing. And he wasn't remotely spiritual. He certainly didn't believe in an afterlife or anything, and that made it particularly hard for the one left behind. And she says, as it turned out, he did suffer greatly, and it made me feel much sorrow. One day I was with him in the hospital as he gradually put the earthly life behind him. The family had made sure there was a fresh bouquet of birds of paradise flowers that he could see at the end of his bed. A new vase full of the flowers had arrived that morning, and when I got there, he turned his head from his pillow, ever so slightly, to look at me. His voice had been weak, and he had been drifting in and out of sleep for several days. But at this moment, my father's eyes were bright, his voice was strong, and he seemed filled with energy as he said, "Did you see Hazel when you came in?" Hazel was his mother-in-law, who'd been dead for quite a few years. I replied I hadn't seen her, and asked where she was. He said, "Right there. Her face was right there." His head was lifted off the pillow, and he was pointing to the vase of birds of paradise flowers. "I saw her right there, smiling at me." I found tears in my eyes and said, "Oh, Poppy, I'm so glad. Do you think she's come to get you?" And the man that wasn't sure that there was any life after death said simply, "Yes." I'll leave the story there, but I think you'll agree how touching that is, and how people who are completely in denial about spiritual things go through a very powerful process at the end. Just one last thing from his daughter. She said, I've lost it, but I can remember, she said so well, it was as though his whole life had been leading up to this moment of victory. And those last three lives, those last 3 years were the moment of greatest triumph in his life. And having worked with people right through their lives, I would so bear that out. Sometimes the way you die is actually the most powerful moment, the greatest thing you do. My last story, and it's terribly personal, it's my dear Aunt Joan, Jenny's mother, and I had seen, no, let's start the story again. We thought that she was the most healthy person out. She had a wonderful positive attitude to life, and then all of a sudden she was diagnosed with acute myeloblastic leukemia. I hope I've got the name right. Anyway, it's the form of leukemia that takes you very, very quickly. And I think we were told that she had something like 6 weeks to live. A massive shock. Such was her strength of spirit. She broke, I don't know whether it's all the records, but she must have broken an awful lot of records. She continued living a more or less normal life, radiating light for at least a year and a half. and it was so touching to see how she handled it. Now, with that length of time that she was going through her process, needless to say, I was away many times, and very near the end, I was actually up in Scotland on a walking trip, and I had the news that her end was um, all of a sudden very close, and I got a compassionate flight home. They moved my flight forward without charge. And but even then, I had an awful slow time getting from the airport back down to Newlands, where Joan was. You might think that all of that was a turbulent time, and it certainly felt so to me. Actually, what was so touching was that the timing was exact. It was precise. She had ceased being lucid for much of the time in those last 48, 72 hours. And when I arrived, she just had one of her last, indeed, I think her very last lucid moment. We had the most wonderful conversation. I'm going to read you how I put it in that book. You will find the whole story there. I hit to the minute Joan's last really lucid spell, even though it was 10:30 at night when I returned and hurried into her cottage. It was as though she knew exactly when I was coming, although no one else knew the time. Indeed, she had apparently said earlier, "I will wait and see Col, and then I will go home." Everyone left us. We had an absolutely wonderful and deeply intimate conversation in which she most beautifully wished me well in my life. It was as though in no way that she had ever done, while fit and well, she had looked right into and addressed my innermost soul. And then I go on to describe the process of her dying, which took place the next day. It was very gradual, very slow. She just very, very, very quietly slipped away. The feeling that I had at the end with my sort of inner vision was like a young bird being taught to fly. And you know how the bird doesn't really want the young one doesn't really want to take the risk, and you feel that Mother Bird is there urging them on. And I just felt her edging her way very, very closely to the edge of the branch, little by little by little. And the moment when she took off was actually imperceptible to us around her. The moment came when the nurse said, "She's gone." But it taught me how every second of life is actually in the hands of spirit. And however we believe we might not have lived our lives as we wanted, my goodness, there is a wonderful, wonderful love that supports us. Thank you all so much for being here today. Without any delay, we only have 15 minutes left. Anything you would like to share? Hamida, you have a question.
How do you handle the situation of a dying person who holds on to the traditional Christian belief, awaiting the sounding of the last trumpet?
Did you hear that, Bev? There was a bit of disturbance. It's when you're up against rather strongly held belief systems, which seem to say the opposite of what you're trying to achieve. You're muted. You'll just have to unmute.
Unmute. Okay, can you hear me now?
We can.
Yes.
Yes. Generally, and I've sat with several hundred people in the moment of their passing, and generally there seems to be an acceptance. It's also part of the air element that dissipates when you get to that point. I have only ever seen one person who has fought death with tooth and nail, and she was 105 years old, and she was extremely cantankerous, and she fought right to her last breath. But most people, honestly, find some peace, and they really just surrender to what is happening. Often people are unconscious at the last anyway. They may have been unconscious for quite some time, or it may just happen very quickly at the end. But most people I have found have found some peace.
Thank you, Bev.
Thank you.
It's Janice. I'm now here, and I do apologise. I'm using my daughter's PC. Mine's just
Oh, yes.
given up. I just wanted to say that in our breakout group, the subject of widowhood cropped up, and I wondered. I know it's connected with death, obviously, but the loss of your partner over many decades is a huge thing. I wondered if that was something that ought to perhaps be included in this discussion.
Absolutely. I think it should, Janice. And I also did mean to say at the beginning of this final session that stuff that came up in your breakout groups, no, not to break other people's confidence, but if there's anything that is feeling like a loose end to you, do bring that up. But I'm not sure, dear Janice, what the question is behind there. I mean, obviously, widowerhood is a very major part of things. Anyone maybe want to make a comment themselves?
Can I just say, sticking my finger in the pie,
Yes, dear Joan. You're no
my
stranger
dog
to this.
passed away quite a long time ago now. And when it happened, or just after it happened, the label I absolutely hated really was being a widow. As far as I'm concerned, I've still got a husband. He just happens to be in the world of light.
Dear Joan, I know you well, and many others here know you, and I think we would all agree that you are a shining example of that. Mara, you have put your hand up.
I'd like to just say that although when people die and their partners, wives, husbands, etc., are left behind, and there is that grieving, it also happens very much to people whose marriages have split up for whatever reason. And a lot of it is not understood by the general public, I don't think, because they're all saying, oh, how's so-and-so, when you're really hurting inside. And at times you can actually feel jealous in a way of those whose partner has died, because they haven't got that constant questioning. Their grief is understood, whereas in the situation where marriage is split up, that grief is not necessarily understood by the majority of people at all.
Bless you, Mara. That's a very helpful comment, and I hope we all have taken that in. I'm still going to move on expeditiously, though. Lynette, your hand is up. All those miles away.
Yes, well, it's almost 3 a.m. here, so yeah, getting a bit tired. But yeah, the widow, just talking about that, I found it really difficult being a widow. It's you're almost like having to redefine who you are and not having that partner with you. Um, so anyone who is a widow, you know what I'm talking about. And if you've got friends that are widows, don't cut them off, because I've found that sometimes people um, just don't want to. When you're a couple, you go out together, but when you're alone, it's so different. So that's all I want to say.
Thank
Lynette,
you.
But
thank
thank
you
you. It's
so
been so
much.
good. Yeah.
Spoken from the heart, and what comes from the heart always carries a ring of truth. And I'm going to thank you all for working from your hearts. I do think you've all been here, and I've seen some of the lovely things you've said in the chat. You've brought so much to this. We're going to move into a round of goodbyes now, while we've still got our technical support. Anna's got her hand up, so I'm going to ask you to say what you had to say, but also say goodbye, Anna. And then, Tom, if we can just go round the speakers individually, and we'll say our individual goodbyes. So, Anna, over to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple of things about grief. And that is that there's a difference between grief that is grieving for somebody who's gone on and grief which is actually just missing the person physically. And there's nothing wrong with that. And even though we might be spiritually minded and actually believe in the afterlife, I think the fact that we still support and have great respect for people's grief, no matter what form it takes.
Bless you, dear Anna.
And goodbye. And it's been lovely.
And goodbye.
And it's been lovely to be with you. Thank you.
When people pass, they often forget to say goodbye, don't they? Jane, you're next in line.
No, well, it's just a hello and a goodbye from me, really. Thank you for being part of this, and I just hope that something of everything that's been said and shared has been a seed that's been helpful for the listeners.
And Bev.
Thank you, everybody, and please remember to live the life you have in the best possible way. Live your best life, be kind to yourselves, be kind to others, and blessings to everyone.
Dear Bev, thank you. Thank you so
Bev.
much. You brought us so much today with your touching of the really practical aspects. You did a very good grounding exercise on us all, I think.
It was definitely grounding.
Bless you. Over to Janice. Tom, if you're looking for Janice's picture, don't forget she's now
Don't
Carolyn
worry.
Bond.
Well, with apologies that I've been coming and going like a yo-yo. Thank you, Bev. That was I just underscore what you've said. I think what I'd like to say at the end is that even this very discussion is actually affecting the morphic field and will help other people that we've never met way out there to also be more open about this subject and to treat it in the way that we've all been speaking. So thank you, everybody, very much indeed. It's been lovely despite all my technical issues.
I don't think the technical things, honestly, are what we will all remember. But what you say about what we do affecting everyone is a really important note on which to end, I think, because life is connected. There's no such thing really as separation. There's no such thing as separation at death, but there's no such thing as separation between you and me and you and you and you and you and you and so on, right to the opposite end of the universe. What we have to do is to learn how to embrace that connection. And so that might be something to move on to another time. I'm so touched by all of your attendance and focus and everything. Thank you, all speakers. Thank you, Tom, our technical person, who does all the unnoticed work, but without whom we would be kind of non-existent, if you see what I mean. Thank you, Tom, so much. You go and walk your dog now. Oh, yes. Do you want to say something, Tom?
No, I was going to say thank you. No, thanks everybody for joining. It's been very insightful today. Yeah, so thank you. I just have to make sure that my dog has some nice classical music to listen to whilst the fireworks go on.
Yes. Oh gosh, yes. Tom, next Tuesday, my 9 a.m. meditation is on how to meditate when the fireworks are going off. So you better bring your dog to that.
I'll bring Bobby along.
Jolly good. Okay. Well, it's over and out, everyone, and lovely to be together. And from White Eagle's side of things, lovely to have Kana with us and also to have Bev with us and what she has brought from the Soul Midwives. And I'm sure, Anna, you echo that. And dear Kana people and Bev, we're all together. There's no separation.
No, namaste.
Namaste.